Good evening, Red Star Rebels. It's March 21st, 2023, and this is Podcast Season 3, Episode Number 8. We are Red Star Report. I'm Hal G. Lohr, and this is Voices for the California Nation. It was a dark and stormy night in the City of Angels. Okay, enough warmth. Let's talk about guns.
It just feels like this happens over and over and over again. Rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. It wasn't that long ago I was standing out here talking about the tragic loss of children, one in a mother's arms, the Gilroy Festival, just here in this community, down in Southern California, and San Bernardino. I remember a few years prior in Santa Barbara. Pick a state. And here we are in the United States of America. We're experiencing something just is not experienced anywhere else in the world. There's a sameness to this. And that numbness, I think, is something we're all feeling. All of us gathered here today, looking at this scene, listening to governors, mayors, chiefs, speaking similar tone and terms, expression of condolences, all the right emotions and perhaps the right words, but it begs the damn question, what the hell is going on in the United States of America?
That video clip was from Gavin Newsom shot a couple weeks ago, admittedly. But I think it's more telling than the restatement of California's stance on gun control is the pure exasperation in the tone and body language the governor displays. The obvious frustration of a man whose political aspirations make him desperate to do something about gun violence, as he's stuck answering the same old questions after yet another mass shooting. A liberal Democrat who hasn't made the leap of logic yet that it's too late for gun control to work in California in today's American political climate. Because the modern reality is that the U.S. government's all-too-predictable response to any mass shooting is guaranteed to be another useless round of thoughts and prayers. Then outrage from the political right accusing anyone calling for gun reform after a mass shooting of politicizing the tragedy red state gun policies enable. Followed quietly by another round of pro-assault weapons Supreme Court litigation, of course, and gun lobby-driven state and federal government legislation that will be put in place as soon as the latest mass shooting drops off the current news cycle. Newsflash. For many Californians, none of this works, and the current never-ending battle over gun control between Sacramento and Washington, D.C., is just creating frustration felt on all sides when we have no way of knowing if what is illegal in California today will be legal tomorrow. Making gun laws an issue arguably the most divisive and confusing in our nation state. For decades, multiple administrations of California governors have signed gun laws giving California one of the lowest violent crime rates and homicide rates in the United States. Public safety legislation that has inarguably proven its effectiveness time and time again, that gets shot down, unfortunately, and repeatedly by unelected and all too untouchable far-right appointed federal judges and conservative partisan federal courts. All this done to undermine the efforts of duly elected California lawmakers for the sake of an ultra-conservative American militant pro-gun agenda. Tragically, ironic federal nullification of the very security of California as a free state, the Second Amendment itself was supposed to guarantee in the ever-forgotten first half of the text that reads, a well-regulated militia being necessary for the security of a free state. A California free state security subverted by a Supreme Court that obtusely misinterprets the Second Amendment of a U.S. Constitution they've sworn to uphold, just so right-wing minority rule can sail to power on a smooth sea of silenced voices, liberal tears, and innocent blood. And the biggest problem facing Californians looking down the barrel of all these latest Second Amendment court rulings and legal challenges? California has lost the fight. Not surprising, considering how completely the fight over guns in America, like the fight over many other things, has been systematically rigged at state and local levels by the Republican Party as federally elected Democrats watched in stunned denial and inaction. So now, with Republican presidential candidates hitting the campaign trail, racing to the bottom on things like abortion, critical race theory, guns, voting rights, school books, wokeness, and drag queens, all vying to see who can deliver the most fascist, most white nationalistic, most anti-California progressive campaign platform in the greasiest, smoothest, and most polished fashion possible. The die-hard right patriots and their MAGA militias in red state America are stockpiling arsenals of anti-democracy, making the Republican elephant in the room a question of while California state legislators battle against overwhelming federal pushback in an effort to protect the people of California from gun violence by disarming them, mass shootings across the United States, including here in California, are becoming normalized even as they become more far-right politically and culturally motivated. I mean, as Californians, we've seen the dress rehearsals demonstrated by the January 6th riot. And we've already heard the MAGA militia stance that any defeat in the 2024 presidential election can only be caused by an evil, anti-American, communist, socialist conspiracy by people who hate God, freedom, and the true American way. If you listen to America's heartland political talk radio stations long enough, you get the message. Red State America is prepping to take their country back by any means, and that includes force if they feel it necessary. So now, as Californians, we're faced with the hideous public safety nightmare dilemma. A question where the most ironic part of the gun argument facing Californians today is that what was nothing more than an NRA slogan a few years ago may now have become a twisted, dark, self-fulfilling prophecy. The only thing that can stop a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun. With what can only be described as an American cold civil war well underway, and with openly alt-right U.S. Congress members calling, not calling, for a shooting Civil War 2.0, for peace-loving Californians, that stupid NRA slogan takes on a whole new meaning as we face the truth about who the bad guys with the guns really are. Here's a hint. Good guys don't want to force their neighbors to live by their rules at gunpoint. And it's grossly ironic here because that's the very fear of tyranny the American right has used to justify the Second Amendment's corrupted existence in the first place. So I hear the frustration in Gavin Newsom's voice, but at this point in American history, there's a serious question of practicalities and priorities here that the governor and the Democratic Party seem to be trying desperately to ignore. Continuing to push for gun control in California feels like a waste of time and resources in the face of other more addressable problems like homelessness. Add that to the very real possibility of doing more harm than good if gun control in the Golden State leaves individual Californians defenseless and targeted for oppression in their homes. Californians left at the mercy of a heavily armed MAGA American minority swept up in glorious fantasies of patriotic violence, white supremacy, and fascism. So if we really want to speak to Gavin Newsom's frustration on the subject of mass shootings, at the lack of federal response on gun control and public safety, it might be an idea to remind him that politics is usually a choice between the lesser of two evils, and in this case, of evolving division, a call for prudence must not be seen as a call for violence. Because the reality is, if the federal government can't find the courage to actually disarm ultra-right extremists openly calling for Civil War 2.0, even after an attempted coup like January 6th, then further California state attempts to regulate guns just don't make sense. This is Voices for the California Nation. I'm Hal G. Lohr for the hashtag NewCalExit podcast, Red Star Report, as heard on KPFK 90.7 Los Angeles, Rebel Alliance News. Tonight, on Activism in Action, Shankar Singham artfully paints the portrait of what a dystopian California could look like using nothing but a pre-normalized American color palette, proving that, like most art, to see the big picture, you often have to take a step back and change your perspective. Let's go watch Shankar work.
Hello, and thank you for checking out another Activism in Action. Today I have some news from all around California. It seems that red counties in California are under a right-wing onslaught, most likely funded by some deep pockets in the GOP. Let me just go through some of the headlines that have recently appeared in California newspapers. Yolo County in Central California has gutted marriage equality and decided to allow the county clerk to use his discretion when issuing marriage permits. Yolo County Board of Supervisors have voted to have the county clerk deny or approve licenses to same-sex, interfaith, or interracial couples. The clerk has a set of guidelines that they must follow. Though those guidelines haven't been made to the public, as such, there hasn't been much pushback yet from Sacramento. The motion is set to take effect as early as April. Yolo County has already banned drag shows within the county lines. Cities in Yolo County include Elks Grove, Dunnigan, Clarksburg, and West Sacramento. Further south, San Diego County Commission Land of Management has voted to ban certain immigrants from purchasing land within the county. In a 4-1 vote, immigrants from Mexico, Central America, South America, China, and Iran are now banned from purchasing and owning land in San Diego County. The rule does not apply to citizens and green card holders. The city of Alturas in Modoc County, California, has decided to join 20 other states in banning abortions as early as 6 weeks. Currently, most states are at the 15-week time period. Altura has decided to make it 6 weeks. The city is in violation of state law, and if the measure passes vote in the county, the state Superior Court will surely strike it down. Shasta County has voted to decriminalize cannabis. Unfortunately, the measure failed to get enough votes to pass. So Shasta joins a shrinking list of states that have cannabis listed as a Schedule I drug, as stated by federal courts. The fear of gangs and violence has Shasta County constituents afraid of the decriminalization. If found with less than a gram of cannabis, one is fined $500 and or 30 days in jail. The county has been a base of operations for the DEA, the Drug Enforcement Agency, in its fight against California cannabis farmers. Del Norte County has lowered the working age to 14 years old. Del Norte meatpacking industry in California is in dire needs of employees, and the county feels that the lower age will attract more undocumented families to the county. Families that are undocumented, too afraid to enroll their children in school, now have a choice to put them to work. Meatpacking jobs pay minimum wage and are constantly in violation of the state's health codes and sanitary requirements. Now, you must be asking, what is happening to our beloved state? What has happened to our freedoms? Why is California moving back in time? Well, folks, it's not. Everything I just reported would never happen in California. But everything I just reported is currently happening in the United States. Tennessee is allowing county clerks to refuse marriage licenses to same-sex, interfaith, and interracial couples. Tennessee has introduced over a dozen laws targeting the LGBT community. Human rights groups have charged the state of being in violation of international human rights standards. Texas has banned immigrants from purchasing land, specifically from China and Iran. Chinese residents are incensed in Texas at the proposal and are currently fighting the measure. Kentucky has banned drag shows that are close to children. Kentucky currently ranks the 42nd worst state economically. And apparently, this ban would somehow help the state's financial hardship. Oklahoma criminalizes cannabis. The state could generate billions from cannabis sales, as other states are currently doing. But the wonderful people of Oklahoma, in their fears of gangs and violence, have chosen to remain 47th in worse economies. Just 2 more states to beat Oklahoma, and you'll be the king of the worst states economically. Arkansas lowers the working age to 14 to attract more undocumented families to the state. Arkansas lawmakers have advanced a bill which would do away with work permits for minors under the age of 16. House Bill 1410 would no longer require kids under 16 to provide proof of age, a description of their work schedule, or parental consent to the State Department of Labor and Licensing in order to get a job. And even if the state doesn't do anything with these permits, it still requires that employers see a piece of paper that says the parent says it's okay for the 13-year-old to have this job. And without it, actually, I would say that they're cutting the parents out of the process completely. And of course, Florida is currently voting on a 6-week abortion ban after promising its constituents that a 15-week ban would be the final change. It hasn't even been a year, folks, and now they're moving it down to 6 weeks. These laws are currently in effect or about to be in effect in the United States, with the LGBT community bearing the brunt of these legal attacks. Every weekend in the United States, groups of white supremacists gather and chant Sieg Heil, and amongst other taunts, in front of drag shows across the United States. The assault against the LGBT community will never stop from the right wing. The LGBT community is the biggest threat to the right wing. For in that community, the LGBT community, it encompasses all of us, regardless of race, ethnicity, or religion. The LGBT community is our representative. Taking out the LGBT community would be their greatest victory. It would be a warning beacon to all minorities to keep your head down and obey. This is the holy grail for the white power supremacists. The fact that the U.S. fails to have a zero-tolerance policy towards Nazi white supremacists who have murdered thousands of Americans and threatened millions more only shows the U.S.'s true feelings of its roots. It is a sobering fact that the U.S. was born of racism. It thrives on war and violence while subjugating the poor and the weak. And at what point do you break? At what point have you had enough? At what point do you get off your knees and stand with communities that don't represent you against this prejudiced assault? Not because you care of their plight, but because you need to protect your own. If you realize that most of the large problems that afflict the U.S. have no bearing in California, and this is how it's always going to be, I would advise you to rethink your position. As Newsom stated, they're coming after you next. Is this the California you want to live in? For those that think the aforementioned laws would not reach California, you are certainly right. In an independent California. That's all I got. Back to you.
Thank you, Shankar. How do you illustrate the agenda of the American fascist early enough in the process to give people who want nothing to do with that kind of society enough of an early warning to do something about it? As the hashtag #NewCalExit Media Group for the California Independence Movement, all we really can do is tell you that it's happening. I'll show you where it's gaining a foothold. And we can lead the California bear to water, but we can't make it drink. That's up to all of you. For Red Star Report, I have to say the tragedy is not being the bearer of bad news here. it would be to find ourselves in the end leaning into these microphones and saying, "We told you so." That was Activism in Action with Shankar Singham. Red Star Rebels, listener-supported KPFK 90.7 FM Los Angeles needs your support. So Red Star Report would like to continue to encourage you to keep listener-supported KPFK Los Angeles on the air for everyone who believes in California progressive values. So go to KPFK's website, which we will list below, and make a pledge to keep KPFK 90.7 FM Los Angeles on the air. Tell them Red Star Report sent you. As the storm goes on and the rain continues to fall, let's go to Talking Points. This is Talking Points. I've said it before, and obviously I'll say it again, and probably again. Not all independence movements are created equal. In 1836, Governor Juan Baptista Alvarado, frustrated with the Mexican government's lack of support for a fast-growing California, declared California independence and raised a large white flag with a big red star over the capital of Monterey. A largely forgotten and inclusive California independence that would grow and prosper for the next 10 years, creating an inconvenient historical footnote, all but erased from whitewashed American history books. History books that prefer to glorify the U.S.-backed coup famously known as the Bear Flag Rebellion of 1846, where American military operatives swore oaths of California citizenship, then broke them to overthrow a legitimate independent California. Ironically, redeclaring California's independence from a Mexico that California was no longer technically part of, and within days, ceremonially handing a California the Bear Flag American operatives didn't legally own to the United States. FYI, Juan Baptista Alvarado's 1836 Red Star Rebellion flag are why we see the red star on the California state flag today and is the inspiration for the name Red Star Report. Bet you didn't know that. So, talk of independence is nothing new for Californians. Recently, we've had a dozen different national, state, regional, and even local calls for various kinds of secession. Calls for an independent state of Jefferson, and the Inland Empire voted to secede from California, to name a couple. We've also seen a number of initiatives and movements with hashtags like Cal 6, Cal 3, Cal Exit 3, and of course our own hashtag New Cal Exit. But the current American flavor of the month has to be national divorce. And for Californians, in the sake of clarity, the difference between them are pretty stark. For Cal 6 and Cal 3, it's enough to know that they were failed California ballot initiatives designed by a Silicon Valley billionaire to split up California and create new U.S. states divided to give more power to Republicans in the federal government. Cal Exit, on the other hand, was an initiative effort most people at the time thought was a legitimate California secession movement that began to gain real traction with the run-up to the election of Donald Trump. Until everyone found out that members of the initiative's Yes California leadership group had been co-opted by Russian operatives as part of that country's efforts to disrupt the 2016 election. Cal Exit 3 is that same Yes California leadership that was, up until recently anyway, still under U.S. investigation for its Russian ties, promoting an online effort to rebrand itself as a conservative organization that now hates all things California. Like the concept of national divorce, Cal Exit 3's idea divides California along political lines, with the difference that political red districts would remain part of the United States and blue districts would get kicked out of America to become an independent country. Which for Californians brings us to national divorce, where the origin is obviously somewhere on the far political right, but there's no doubt that Marjorie Taylor Greene didn't come up with the concept on her own. She can, however, claim credit for tweeting the idea of national divorce into the national conversation. Kudos. For an insight into Marjorie Taylor Greene's vision of national divorce, she tweeted that she's not calling for a civil war, which she has done in the past, actually, but rather for a legal agreement to separate our ideological and political disagreements by states while maintaining our legal union. Most federal programs should be abolished, but the federal government would still exist and maintain things like the Department of Defense. She promoted the idea that red states would temporarily strip Americans who moved from blue states of the right to vote for 5 years, temporarily voiding them of a constitutional right. And if we have a national divorce, there's no need for the Department of Education, she said. Red states would be in control of the education system in each state. They would not allow any type of gender study lies being taught in school. Teachers would be fired and not allowed to teach, and schools in red states would allow parents to be able to choose the curriculum. Without the usual checks and balances, Greene's vision for a national divorce is pretty well laid out, as red states will also likely gain the power to make Christianity a state religion, bring back prayer in school, eliminate gun control, remove all limits on fossil fuel pollution, openly discriminate against anyone, ban abortion and immigration, recognize only two genders, ban books, ban all concept of environmental social governance, ban critical race theory, and, criminalize anything they view as communism or socialism or wokeness. Drag queens? For Californians, as I said, not all independence movements are created equal. Today's California independence movement, or hashtag #NewCalExit, is centered on someday having a free, just, diverse, peaceful, and prosperous California Republic. A California Republic ready to take its place in the global community based on the progressive and evolved values held by the overwhelming majority of Californians. California values that history has shown time and again will never be realized as long as California remains subjugated to the whims of the U.S. federal political system. National divorce may be trending, on the other hand, but it's not an independence or secessionist movement, no matter what the corporate media says. For Californians, national divorce is a worst of all possible world scenario where conservative red states gain the unchecked power to regress and reshape the social, cultural, and political structure of the United States, just barely left intact enough to make sure that blue donor states like California will not be welcome, but will still have to continue paying the bills forever. Sorry to burst Marjorie Taylor Greene's national divorce bubble here, but last time I checked, and I know a thing or two about this, legitimate independence movements don't pay alimony. And as I said, not all independence movements are created equal. This is Talking Points with Hal G. Lohr for the hashtag #NewCalExit podcast Red Star Report, as heard on KPFK 90.7 FM Los Angeles, Rebel Alliance News. That's it. Podcast number 8 of our 3rd season. For more Red Star Report information, check out our website at redstarreport.com. Please subscribe to our Red Star Report YouTube channel. Go to our Red Star Report Facebook page, Twitter page, and Instagram page and give us a like. Give us a follow. Because if you want to support the real California independence movement's hashtag New Cal Exit Media Group, it's all about the algorithms. And hey, seriously, click that link below and pledge support for our friends at listener-supported radio, KPFK 90.7 FM Los Angeles. Because KPFK does deserve your support. Our thanks to you and all our Red Star Rebels for watching. We are Red Star Report.